My questions are going to be on the Pathways to Work Green Paper. I think most people accept the need to reform our social security system, but also in terms of transforming the need to transform our labour market to enable disabled people to flourish within it. But based on the evidence of similar disability benefit cuts, for example, in 2017, the work-related activity component of employment and support allowance, we saw that, unfortunately, there wasn't the deliverance of increased jobs for sick and disabled people. And in fact, we saw an increase in mental health issues and 28,000 sick and disabled people pushed into severe poverty. So how are we going to ensure that in terms of the reforms that are proposed in the Green Paper, that we won't push more sick and disabled people into poverty and further away from the labour market?
Well, they can't, because they've already done the impact assessment and it's already said that hundreds of thousands of people are going to be in poverty because of these changes, including 50,000 children. So we can't guarantee that more people won't go into poverty because they already know that they will and they're not U-turning.
We need to learn the lessons, as you rightly point out, from the past where proposals were put into place which in the end didn't achieve the desired end. I don't think that means that nothing can ever work. I don't accept that for a minute. And I'm very struck by the additional number of people that are now not in work. And I do think that the measures we put in place, the right to try work, for example, I genuinely...
This wasn't a question about right to try. This was about the reforms that are taking money away from people. Stop deflecting away from the actual question to talk about, admittedly, the good things. Because there aren't all bad things in the Green Paper, but this is a question that was directed towards the cuts in disability and the failures of previous disability cuts that haven't helped disabled people get back into work and have only pushed them into further poverty. Because that's what the impact assessment said would happen with the current state of the Green Paper.
I think could make a huge difference. I've seen many examples, you yourself will have as well, of people who would like to take the step into work but are worried that if they do and they fail, then they won't get the work and they won't have the benefit at the end of the exercise. I've seen pilots of this that I've gone to look at myself, where some firms have voluntarily said, we'll do a sort of right to try scheme. And to my mind, and the evidence I saw in front of me, they worked pretty well. Not every case, I would admit, but they worked pretty well. And we need to go through each of the measures with that approach, checking it against delivery. But I am convinced that some of these can make a material difference, including...
You're going to check them against delivery. Maybe, just use a little bit of common sense. Use a little bit of like rational thinking about what happens when you cut access to welfare for people who use that welfare to survive and expect them to be more likely to be in work. Just put two and two together and maybe do the good things and not the bad things. It's really, you ran a political campaign off of the basic promise of we will do the good things and not the bad things. And yet you're here telling me that you have to do the bad things. Waiting for the good things to happen, Keir, and just wondering. You've already committed to cutting the money because, as we all know, last time the previous government tried to cut away disability benefits, they did a consultation on those cuts, which was found under judicial review to be unlawful because they lied about it being about getting the disabled back into work, and they were actually only doing it to penny pinch from the Treasury. This is why the fiscal elements of the Right to Work Green Paper are not going to consultation, because they know they would lose because of the judicial review, because it is just about penny pinching for the Treasury, and they don't have any plan to deal with the fallout of previous PIP claimants who are now not going to be eligible, losing the money they need to survive. And the thing is, even if they do check this against the delivery, and the outcome that they find after implementing these cuts is that all it did was lead the disabled into poverty and lead people who use PIP to stay in work to be out of work because they can no longer cope with working because they don't have the same reasonable adjustments, will they U-turn? Will they change course when the evidence shows that it was a shitty policy? Of course they won't.
The right to try work and the support we're going to put to people who want to get into work.
Thank you, Chair. So on top of the issue around lack of deliverability on employment outcomes, again, at international level evidence and also our own experience here of the last 10 years, we also saw that fiscal savings were not made. So given that the OBR has refused to score the supply side effects of the Green Paper, that JRF the Joseph Rowntree Foundation analysis indicates that not 250,000 people, as the government estimates, will be pushed into poverty, but 400,000. And that children in family poverty and adversity are five times more likely to end up as NEETs as young people. What needs to happen to ensure that the Green Paper addresses the root causes of this poverty and adversity rather than adds to them?
Yeah, I mean,
well, the problem, of course, is that this is a result of poor healthcare outcomes, not poor welfare outcomes. That's the whole problem, is that the reason why we have loads of people on disability is because the NHS is screwed up. Because of Tory austerity that reduced NHS funding as a percentage of GDP every year from 2010 till 2019 and left us overexposed to the pandemic, which then exploded the waiting lists when our small amount of wiggle room was blasted through by the extra demand that COVID created, and we haven't recovered since. We have to extra fund the NHS to put it at the state that it needs to make it comparable to other nations similar size and economic scale as us, and then also to undo the damage that was dealt by COVID and the lack of investment from 2010 till 2019. And that will help get people back into work. 40% of people on incapacity benefits are those who are on NHS waiting lists. This is a healthcare, not a welfare problem.
Thank you for raising that. On the impact assessments, it is significant to my mind that the ability of any policy or legislation to change any behaviour at all is not priced in. In other words, there is simply, the OBR have scored nothing against any change here. The assumption is not a single person changes their behaviour. I personally struggle with that way.
But you've not provided any evidence that it will change their behaviour, especially the financial elements, which are going to take people who cannot work and make it harder for them to exist. So it's just going to be a direct route to poverty. And it's also going to take people who are currently in work and make it harder for them to stay in work. You've not provided any evidence that will help people to get back into work at all, because, of course, the whole point of this isn't about getting people back to work. It's about penny pinching for the Treasury. There's a reason why the OBR didn't price this stuff in, because it wasn't your aim with the fiscal elements of the Green Paper.
Of looking at it, because I do think that these measures will make a material difference, and they need to make a material difference. You talk about NEETs, and I'm very worried about the 1 in 8 young people who is currently not earning or learning, because there's a pattern here of young people who are caught, in my view, in sort of COVID years, who've then gone straight into...
Can I stop you? I do apologise. I did actually mention NEETs. So there is new evidence that shows that it is child poverty and family adversity that are the key drivers of this. COVID does play a part, and particularly for countries like ours, countries like the US, which have a particularly bad experience of COVID. But it is, as I say, this is peer-reviewed evidence that is showing that it is poverty and family adversity that are the key drivers around this. So how are we going to make sure that we don't make that worse by pushing more families into poverty prematurely? So,
I mean, she's absolutely got him nailed to a cross here, hasn't she? Straight up nailed to a cross. You're trying to say that there's a problem with young people being out of work, education or training. You're trying to say that cutting welfare will stop this, when all of the evidence shows that it's the poverty that has been created by a lack of welfare in this country that has caused them to continue to not be in work, education or into training. And you're trying to do the same failed welfare cuts that have led to an increase in people being out of work. We have tried year after year after year of welfare cuts, expecting it to increase labour force participation, and it has not worked. And yet here you are, given all the evidence, trying to do the same thing. Again, because it's not about getting people back into work, it's about penny pinching for the Treasury. She's got him banged to rights. She has him banged to rights here. He cannot answer this.
At all.
Yeah.
I think your point on the impact assessment one is very well made, Prime Minister. And again, I don't know if you're aware of what impact assessments are in the pipeline, because clearly what was analysed in terms of the poverty impact assessment, we had no employment impact assessment that there are real issues. So will you now commission independent analysis to ensure that we do have robust evidence, and so the policies that we are trying to implement for all the right reasons have the effects that we want?
Yeah, we have to have the right evidence base, and that is crucially important. We also have to do the work that we're committed to on child poverty.
Why did you not get the evidence before writing the Green Paper? Why didn't you get independent advice on what the outcome would be of taking benefits away from people before you went ahead and said we're going to cut the benefits? It's almost like, it's almost like this was being done to pinch pennies for the Treasury, and they didn't care about the actual outcomes of that for the people who it was going to affect financially. Otherwise, they would have done this shit already.
And the child poverty strategy, which is proceeding because one of the achievements of the last Labour government was to reduce child poverty, and I want this Labour government to reduce child poverty as well.
So why are you keeping children in poverty because of welfare cuts that you know are going to do it? Every impact assessment has said it. On the 2-child benefit cap, on the disability cuts, every single thing you've done is shown to increase child poverty, and you're still doing it. You can't just speak to me like I'm an idiot, Keir. You are the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and the 6 counties. You cannot sit here and try and bullshit me into saying, well, we really want to reduce child poverty, while deliberately engaging in multiple policies that you know will increase it. And again, it's all to fit the fiscal rules. It's all to reduce the fiscal headroom because of a slight increase in bond yields from like 4% to 4.6% between January and now. No tax rises, we're going to hit the poorest, we're going to increase child poverty to penny pinch.
Well, and that's why the strategy on child poverty is so important to us. As soon as we're able to share more details of that with you, we obviously will do so.
It is April 2025, Keir. You were elected in July of 2024. How do you not have details about your child poverty strategy 8 months into being in government? What the fuck have you been doing? What on earth have you been doing in the time when you've been in government where you've not been developing a child poverty strategy? You have joined the war on child poverty on the side of child poverty. That's all you've done since July last year. Oh, well, I have to go and speak to Morgan and Pat as they tell me what we're going to do about this child poverty strategy. It's been almost a fucking year. Almost a year, and he doesn't know what he's doing. The same strategy the Tories used to justify any cuts they did as well. Curious. It's almost like he's a red Tory. Just throwing it out there, chat. Just throwing it out there. Adults in the room, guys. This is what the adults in the room looks like. This is what the grown-ups in charge looks like. Somebody saying, we're going to do all these cuts and increase child poverty, but we really want to reduce child poverty, so we're going to wait and have a child poverty strategy. Let me get back to you on what that is. 8 months into being in government, knowing what your child poverty strategy is going to be is what you have in your manifesto years before the election happens, not 8 months into government. What the fuck are we doing?
So we can take your views into account on it.
Final little one, Chair, if that's okay. Well, on that basis, Prime Minister, I absolutely agree with you that we do need to do that work. Will you commit to not implementing legislation before we have the details of those impact assessments? I think that's so important. Otherwise, potentially, we will have policy that won't work and could actually do harm.
Well, as I've said, we need an evidence base, but we also need to get on with the work we need to get on to. So I'm not going to make commitments in relation.
Okay, so what he's saying is we don't need an evidence base because we'll do the policy and then we'll have an evidence base that proves we were wrong and we'll ignore it. He's being explicitly asked, and for good reason, if you find out this will increase child poverty, you should stop it by having an impact assessment done before you implement the policy. And he's refusing to commit to it because he knows it will happen. Because again, they have to save the money. The fiscal headroom, the fiscal rules, and the failure to increase tax. We need to get on with it before we have any evidence. Again, so stupid. And it's something they should have done before getting elected. So it should be something they should have done when they were crafting policy in opposition. Not something they wait 8 months into being in government to start doing. Absolute mess. A giant fucking mess. This entire government, it's entirely being ruled by mess.
Prime Minister, you were talking about the language being important. Do you think that it's important that the language that the Cabinet uses is important and not to demonise people? I mean, your Chief Secretary of the Treasury and the Chancellor both talked about pocket money in relation to the benefits. I just wondered if you are clamping down on that sort of language.
Of course, language matters. I think every member of the Cabinet knows that. Occasionally, people don't get it quite right. They usually apologise, and they're quite right.
It was literally reported that the pocket money line came from you. You did this. You are to blame for the pocket money line because you said this in a cabinet meeting. The press have reported on this. We know that it was you, Keir. Apologise. You are the one who did the pocket money line that was then repeated by Darren Jones and Rachel Reeves. Again, whilst failing to realise that the cuts that are being made to welfare are targeting the disabled, not those looking for work who are actually seeing an increase in universal credit. Above inflation.
Right too, but I completely take your point that language this is the two values that have driven me in everything I've done as a lawyer and as a politician are dignity and respect, and dignity is probably the most important word.
How do you expect the disabled to live in dignity when you are taking away their money? You keep saying that you find dignity in work, that work is a fulfilling thing to engage in, and yet you are taking PIP away from disabled people who are in work, who need that money to keep them well enough to stay in work. Where's the dignity? Where's the dignity and respect? You can't even, respect disabled people enough to answer the questions properly in a liaison committee being asked direct questions about what you would say to the disabled. You can't even say how you would placate the disabled, let alone whether or not you would even find out the effects, the impacts of the policies you want to implement on the disabled when asked, and say, no, we're going to do the cuts anyway, and then we'll come back to it. Dignity and respect. I fucking wish. Dignity and respect, my arse.
In my dictionary, and the dignity of the individual and respect for individuals are the two things that I go to first when it comes to values. And to be fair, that's the same for the Cabinet, but you're right, and there's always the need to remind people about language that's used.
Thank you.
And again, just to remind you, this was the guy who originally used the analogy comparing disability welfare to pocket money. And that's the thing. He will say, I have these values of dignity and respect. And a bunch of know-nothing, clapping seal liberals will go, oh, look at the adults in the room. This is very, very respectful politics. Well done, grown-up politician Keir Starmer. Because they won't notice that the policies do not reflect those values. The policies don't reflect it. If you actually genuinely cared about dignity and respect, Sir Keir, then you would have that reflected in the policies you choose to enact as Prime Minister, which you're not doing, specifically in regard to the disabled. The fact that you were the one who came up with the analogy belies the fact that you are also the people who are trying to push through the policy that harms the disabled. Hey there, if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for membership to just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.